the professional here with a microphone in front of me and gonna ask some questions to my friends. So
I personally thought you were in a dodgy back alley with that background. So
it would definitely the micro content I would get out of this is from a standpoint of video and setting up in a back alley in Vancouver, as you could probably imagine, wouldn't be. It would definitely make for an entertaining show, I would say. But the
I
brick
agree.
wall has made its way from the old show to the new show.
Well,
And
I'm so happy that you wanted to bring me on this show because I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool concept or very cool concept.
well, I wanted to branch out a bit. I love the music side of it, and my career takes me all over the place, and I get to meet all sorts of people. But it was putting me into a space where I was meeting all these other interesting people that not necessarily in my profession, but I want to still talk to them. And I'm like, it doesn't necessarily fit within the format of that show. I did 100 episodes of that show. It's time to change things up a little bit. And you've always been extremely personable on Dean's show. We have a
Mhm.
love of the outdoors, and I'm like, I want to talk about your journey a bit, and we've got fellow voiceover friends. I think I've got some voiceover people in my life
Mm.
that are working and doing great, and it's a fascinating world to me. So I think as part of the teaching of this show and part of the introducing people to various new people and professions, the object is simple, and that is, did you ever want to know what it was like to work in voiceover? Because if you do, I've got the perfect candidate right here. And welcome to the show. And it's show number 2, so we're still building, but I appreciate you making the time. So thank you.
Well, considering that your first guest, it's Tara Sloan, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's a hard to follow up. I have to say that must be hard to. It's gonna be hard to follow, but I'll do my best.
Oh, she's wonderful, and you're wonderful, and we're gonna have a great chat because we love the outdoors, and people who love the outdoors, can speak to that and speak to the outdoors. I have access to potentially a little bit more outdoorsy things than you do over
Mm,
there on
okay,
the east
all right.
side. I've got mountains, I got an ocean, I do have
Mm-hmm.
lakes, bears in the backyard, things like that. I don't know what part of the east you're in as far as the black bear in your backyard part of it, but
Well, I live downtown Ottawa, so black bears aren't really a thing down here. But I see black bears a couple times a season in Gatineau Park, across the way. So
across the way, a little bit
yeah,
more out there.
across the river, like a few minutes away. Yeah.
So you've got an amazing show. We're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff, but Marianne joins me. She's got a great show called Let's Take This Outside. And for the record, I'd like to point out that this logo is awesome with the tree replacing the eye. I
Do you
noticed
like
that. I
that?
love it. I think it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
For people listening, it's a nice, simple, mountainy looking logo. Sorry, a picture in the background, some great trees. Let's take this outside, but the eye is replaced with a tree, and it fits perfectly. So hey, awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. So
I'm sure as a creative too. Like I decided that I wanted to update my logo. I originally created it on Canva, and then I was like, I was probably about 6 months into my podcast, and I'm like, I want to redo it. I want to redo the logo. So I contacted, so I got it professionally done, and we went back and forth, and I'm like, I just want simple. I just want something really easy, and just had loved having the eye as a tree.
yeah.
Um, and I'm really happy with it too. But I'm trying not to touch it. I'm trying not to like. As a creative, I always want to like update and make things better and yeah, so like I love it the way it is, and it's very simple.
Less is more a lot. And we have a mutual friend with Matt Kundle, and when I was talking
Mhm.
to Matt about this concept, and I was sending him some logo ideas, and I actually just dug the just the DoDidWill black on white aspect, and the microphone down in the corner here was sort of like, I want to kind of include that in. And he's like, I don't think you need it. I'm like, you're right. I don't need it in the main logo, but for the video portion, I like that in the corner. So it's
I
like
like in
less
the
is
corner
less
too,
is
but
more. Less
if
is
there's
more.
anything Matt Kundle hates more is a microphone and a podcast logo.
I
If
know it.
there's anything, he hates it, and I completely agree with him on that. But it looks good in this concept, I will say.
Well, it's an interesting one, and my whole mission now is to just make sure Matt's uncomfortable with all the shows that I'm putting putting out. So that's great. You know what I'm saying? So it's a funny one. But anyways, welcome to the show. You've got you're in voiceover. You do tons of stuff. You've got an outdoor podcast. Man, there's a few things that we can discuss.
Mhm.
I'm not going to isolate you as per the professional courtesy here, but
Thank
I
you. I
do have
appreciate
a
that.
question for you. And to get this thing rolling, Marianne, what do you do?
What do I do? I think I could say I'm an audio expert. Is that a fair assumption?
Ooh,
Would you agree with that? I do pretty much all things possibly audio, and that I would have to say stems from radio, which I'm sure we're going to get to. But essentially, my main job, something I started about a year and a half ago, was voiceover work, and that's again stem from radio.
yeah.
Voiceover work, I do commercials, I do e-learning, online videos, podcast intros as well. Voiceover, I would say, is my main thing. Something that I'm truly very, very passionate about that comes straight from my heart. Because with voiceover work, you're doing a job for someone else, and I absolutely love it. But with my podcast, I feel like my heart is outside of my body, and like I'm creating this completely from my soul. So I have a podcast called Let's Take This Outside, and it's about I talk to athletes, outdoor professionals, scientists about their connection to nature. And it's been a roller coaster. My 1 year anniversary is coming up in March for this podcast. What's incredibly cool about this is that the outdoors, you could say this podcast is pretty, it's a niche. And I've been able to like secure a few sponsors on it already, which has been really, really cool. So to monetize something that you create, it makes it a job now, but I love it. So,
It's a difficult space to monetize, and people are that don't know about podcasts or whatever. We all
mhm,
still try to figure out ways to monetize, and
mhm,
uh, it can get nichey. Like it's easier for somebody that has like a movie podcast to get Cineplex on board or something like that. But for us that have different kinds of shows, and I'm speaking to people. It's
mhm.
not like we're not talking auto parts and I have a car sponsor or something. So you've got a great premise with Let's Take This Outside because it can cover so many grounds. And you have this love of the outdoors, which I want to
Mhm.
talk about because you've got some pics on your Twitter profile, which are pretty awesome, of you cross country skiing, which is near
Mhm.
and dear to my heart because I was a competitive skate skier for a long time
That's
in,
so
in
cool.
in high school.
I had no
And
idea.
by competitive, I mean I was out there competing.
No
Doesn't
podiums? No
not
podiums?
necessarily mean that
No
there was a
podiums?
podium
No.
of any side, but
No.
I definitely was competing. Uh, and it was something I greatly enjoyed. So where does this outdoor love come from?
Ooh, well, it all kind of stems from I grew up on a farm, so I've kind of always spent a lot of time outside in southwestern Ontario. But it was very flat there. But spent most of my time playing outside when I was a kid. Moved around a bit for school. Ended up living in Ottawa. But I also there was a stretch in my 20s where I go visit my sister in Canmore, Alberta, where she lived. Now
Ah,
she lives in Cochrane, Alberta. But essentially, I fell in love with the mountains when I was out there. And I started hiking when I was out there. And when I moved to Ottawa, there's so many wonderful, great hiking trails in Ottawa and in Gatineau. And once you get into that lifestyle, as you would know out west, once you get into that lifestyle, you meet people, you start falling in love with other sports.
hmm.
So, hiking turned into trail running, and then I got a bike, and I turned into a cyclist, and then I've been cross country skiing for about 5 or 6 years now, which I absolutely love. I never did any winter sports growing up because we really didn't have snow,
No.
and I kind of wish that I was able to cross country ski as a kid because I'd like to think that I took it up like pretty easily, and I love it, and I love going fast, and I love being outside 365 days a year. Um, I've tried rock climbing here. I've tried like any kind of ice climbing, anything you could imagine. I've pretty much almost tried it all, and I want to keep trying things. Um, but it's the thing that I live for. It's the thing
Hmm.
that brings me the most joy. It's where I feel like the most myself, the most present. It's very like meditative. Yeah. But I know out there you have a few more options with, like you said, oceans and mountains and.
Well, when I moved out this way, I'm an Ontario boy. So for me, I
Mhm,
know what you're saying. It was lakes,
mhm,
it was snowmobiling, it was ice fishing, it was all
mhm,
the things you do.
mhm,
But once I moved out here, and I'm like an hour away from a mountain,
Hmm.
and there's just something. If you don't live near a mountain, I once you do, it's extremely tough to leave that. It's
Hmm.
just, and I go looking for them when I travel for work and all the rest of it. If I'm in overseas in Europe, I am looking for it. I'm looking for
Hmm.
that side, and the ocean, and we have the ability here, and it just ingrains you. It ingrains like
Hmm.
inside of you, and if you're like me and you want to do as much of that outdoor stuff as possible, I'm surprised you don't live out west, if I'm being honest, because there's so much here, and you can make
Yeah.
do with, Ottawa and that area, lakes and all that stuff, and you got Blue Hill there, which is nice. And you've got some Montreal, you got some a little bit of mountainy stuff in Quebec, but I am surprised, you being an outdoor enthusiast, that you aren't out west.
Well, I
I
used to
gotta
go
say,
again. I used to go once a year, so I kind of got my
yeah,
mountain fix there. But for me, it's that they make the outdoors so accessible here. The thing is, I know you're driving an hour to the mountains, totally worth it. But for me to go cross country skiing, it's a 12-minute drive, or
yeah,
there's like it's very very accessible. Or I just jump on a bike path a second from my house, and they close down the entire Gatineau Park for you to cycle all summer long. There's like a couple days where you can drive, but
yeah,
you have you have a lot of space to safely cycle up some really really big hills. So they make the outdoors so accessible, and that's why it's been so hard to leave. And then they have world class cross country ski trails that are like hundreds of or 100 kilometers or more than that of, again, world class cross country ski trails. So I have the Adirondacks, only like, which is upstate New York, only 3-4 hours away. So Quebec is like booming with outdoor activities as well. So there's so many options. So it's been really hard to leave, but it's mostly about community for me. That's kind of made me
yeah.
stick. Because having to start that over at 34 years old is actually overwhelming. But if I was to move anywhere, I almost moved to Calgary last year. And what I call a mid like a quarter life crisis,
Quarter
or,
life.
or midlife crisis. But I have a lot of people out there and like the
Yeah.
outdoors. But again, really hard to leave here, to be honest.
Sure. I mean, mine was work related, but I mean, as I said, once it's in you, and you're like, oh, it's tough. Yeah, I have to go find
Mhm.
it now. Like I actually get withdrawal from the mountains and the ocean and stuff like that.
Mm.
It's quite something.
What else
Um,
do you do? Like what other
I mean,
outdoor activities do you
paddle
do?
boarding, camping, as much as possible.
Hmm.
It's funny. I haven't skied in like 10 years, but I skied in Ontario when I was there. And here I've got the best skiing and probably snowboarding
Hmm.
in the world. But I actually don't do that. I'm more of a water baby. So for me, it's paddle boarding. It's being in the ocean as much as possible for me. I love being around that area. We've got some incredible camping here. And so I'm very much involved in that,
Hmm.
cycling or biking and things like that. And there's tons of hiking and stuff to do here. I just saw something yesterday on the news about this guy that decided to do. He did 75 hikes, and he hiked 75 mountains out here in British Columbia. And he
Incredible.
does not look like an athlete. Just saying.
Mhm.
He does not look like it's something that he's benefited from health wise either. Like I'm just saying, so it's one of those things where I'm looking at it going, he's at the peak of like four of the biggest mountains we have here in British Columbia, and I'm like, huh. All right, I guess I
Good
better
too.
step up the game a little bit, because if I'm there's all that I'm missing. So yeah, I try to find new things to do, but it's busy also. So it's
Yeah.
tough.
It
It's
sounds like
tough.
you're going on the road again soon, so I'm sure
Yeah,
there's yeah.
there's going to be a little bit of road work coming up, but so I try to find it when I go, which includes when I'm
Mhm.
touring and stuff. It includes running and cycling and hiking and getting into oceany and lake kind of stuff when it comes out there. So I'm with you on that side of it. So we'll dive back into the podcast and where it's going down the way. But
Mhm.
um, you're talking about being in audio and being in voiceover. It's
Mhm.
been like 12 years, and you're doing tons of different stuff. So how did you do it? How did you get into this world, and which led you to obviously start a show? But how did you do it?
Well, it could start from, we can maybe go way back to my my little remember my little play school recorder when I was a kid. It was like blue and white and red and yellow, I think. And I used to like record the extra of the songs from on the radio onto tape, and then I would like extra the song or intro the song myself. I was
Oh,
a child when I did that. So I think back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wanted to do this for a long time. But I kind of fell into it. I thought I was going to go into like sport. I thought I was going to go into kinesiology when I was in high school. I don't have the science grades. I'm definitely like a creative English nerd, phys ed. That's where I excelled.
sure.
But not the sciences, not the maths by any means. But then I was like, oh, maybe I'll go to communications. I co-opted a radio station when I was in high school, went to Conestoga College for radio broadcasting, and then I've been working ever since, essentially. Always been that kind of person that's like reaching out, trying to make connections, and it's
Yeah.
kind of really paid off for me. And I've moved all over Ontario. I've only worked in Ontario, everywhere from like Sudbury to Chatham, to Ottawa. And I've been in Ottawa about 10, 11 years now. But I was in radio that whole time. I've done mornings, I've done middays, I've done drive, I've done evenings, I've done it all. And the last station I was at, I was doing afternoon drive at Bell Media here for Pure Country. Got laid off in February 2021,
Yeah.
middle of the pandemic, right?
Of course.
And what's crazy is I was having a conversation with a friend about this the other day of how many skills that I acquired in radio. Something else I'm doing or starting to do is live emceeing, actually.
I saw you were
Yeah.
you were hosting some stuff lately
Yeah, I was
too.
hosting a thing at the
Yeah.
Rito Carlton Casino
Yeah.
here with Jason McCoy.
Mhm.
He was playing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed the energy of this because I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
everything from home. So I'm hoping to do more live emceeing, but there's those kind of skills. There's the audio editing skills. There's the like presentation on microphone, is presenting, interviewing. There's so many things that I was able to do that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can turn this into my own business.
Yeah.
And my heart said, I'm such a nerd, but my heart was like, try something on your own before you work for someone else again.
Sure.
And so I tried voiceover. My first fall was unbelievable. Matt Kundle, our mutual friend, was like, you got to do a podcast. You got to do a podcast. I'm like, no, 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 no. Finally succumbed to it. I'm like, but I want it to be something I'm super passionate about. Started the podcast, fell in love with it. I've also been doing contract radio work again for Bell Media, which has been great because like I do it from home.
Yeah.
The people I work with are like, they're out of Toronto. They're sensational. They're easy to work with. So that's been great too, because there's like some separation between what I used to do full time and what I'm doing now. Yeah.
And you take all that training, and I know a lot of radio
There's a lot.
guys out here, right?
Yeah.
So like Todd
Yeah.
Hancock, who was on the network, and Danger, that were on CFox, and all those
Mhm.
guys got let go, and you have to transfer those skills over.
Mhm.
And the podcast word is a bit of a swear word I'm learning amongst the industry, because like as far as the radio industry, because there's the radio, and then there's everyone that gets laid off from radio, that kind of gets in this world of like, well, what do we do now? And there's only a handful of radio jobs. And is there a bit of a stigma to the podcast space? I mean, it's exploded over the last 2 years, or even 4 years, I would say, especially out of the pandemic. And everyone has a show, including some asshole
Everyone
in the basement, some asshole in the basement against a big brick wall. But the idea is, with the training and the things that you've learned and how to edit and all the rest of it, was that transition like a no-brainer for you, and I can do this, and I'm gonna go for it, and it's gonna be easier for somebody like you that has that training? Or was it scary? I don't know if scary is the word I'm looking for, but it just seems like a huge undertaking. It's like, did you consider completely getting out and just doing something totally out of the industry because you were beaten down and all the rest of it, or was there energy coming out of that?
What I say to people is the way I built my business was with anxiety.
Okay.
And now I'm in a much better place. But back to your original question about podcasting, is there a stigma? Is there like, that's hard to answer. I think that people think that podcasting is easier than it is. I will say that the interviewing skills and, the audio skills and
Yeah,
all like that comes naturally to me, but
sure.
it's everything else that people don't see. Podcasting, building a business, built like that is like people don't understand how hard and how many components there are to building a podcast, building an audience, how long it
Yeah.
takes. You need patience, you need perseverance, you need to be creative. You need like there's so many components to it. It's not just like I'm like a white guy in a basement. I'm just gonna like buy this $100 microphone and I'm gonna make $1 million a year because I want to share my opinions.
Right.
It's like that's not sorry.
Kind of like this show is what you're saying. Kind of
no,
like this
you
show. That's
no, you
been
have a
Marianne on the DoDidWill podcast, everybody.
no. No. You have a logo. It's lovely. You have this beautiful layout. You know exactly what your show's about. It's planned out great. You've already had an entire other show. You have experience. There's a difference. I'm not lumping you into that
It's a
whatsoever.
gag. What I'm saying is it's funny
Yep.
to me because um, it must frustrate the radio people a little bit
Mm.
that this exists now, and that with a little bit of research on the internet and a handful of questions asked to some creative people, that you can design out something, or some random person like myself can just design out something and try to move ahead. And you guys have invested so much of your time into, like, we do it like this, and then it goes like this, and it goes like this. And then
Mm.
I'm like, why don't you come on my show that I created, a couple of years
Yeah.
ago with no training? And you must be like, God damn it.
No.
How long did I spend, in that, it's just interesting to me to kind of see how this space and how the people work within it. And I agree with you, because I'm in essence relaunching a show here from scratch,
Mm.
taking some, I'm on the same RSS feed, but I'm taking
Mm.
my listeners from the other show into this and saying, thank you for sticking around. But I have to build it from scratch, you know?
Honestly, no, I don't think it's frustrating at all. I think people being authentic is 100% the reason why podcasts exist. You don't have to be like you don't I know what I just said, but like you don't have to be a professional for this to go well. It's just
Yeah,
easy. Some aspects of it are just easier for me
sure.
naturally because I put my entire career into it. However, what's funny, and I will point this out to you, especially in voiceover, one of the biggest things is like dropping the radio voice. Like, hi, I'm doing a commercial. Like,
Of
here I
course.
am selling cars. Like, they don't want that. They want the natural. They want the
Yeah.
authentic. They want that real thing. And especially like, and the thing is, like, you and I aren't like introing, extraing songs and taking 60 seconds. I would say one of the harder things is transitioning from all those rules. Whether it's like you only have this amount of time to
Yeah.
talk, or
Yeah.
we tell you, what events to go to, or this or that. Like, the freedom is terrifying, actually. And but
Yeah.
I remember very early on, I had created my logo for my voiceover business, and I just did it myself on Canva.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like, when am I going to launch this? Like, who's going to approve it? And I'm like, oh, mama's in charge. I'm in charge. I can do whatever I want. And so I've, a little power trip there for a second, but also the freedom and the responsibility is very challenging. And I just don't want to undersell how much work it is to build a business, to build a podcast and make
Yeah.
it successful. Does that make sense?
No, it's great. It really is, because, and then it's lightning in a bottle too. So you can plug away, and then all of a sudden it explodes overnight. But then you still have to maintain those people. And I think for somebody like yourself, that, as you just touched on, you got to wait for approval, and you got to wait for this, and you got to wait
Mhm.
for that. Um, but you build it out, and then no one's telling you, thankfully Matt's in our life, but no one's really telling you, like, wow, that just exploded. We've got to keep, you got to get that micro content out now to maintain that. And it's just going to make your head spin. So you're trying to, build this show. And what's the premise? Like, where do
Mhm.
you ultimately want to be with that show? Do you want it
Have
to
we
be the,
moved to Will?
not yet. It's sort of like where you're building, like, one of the things that you touched on earlier was the fact that you've got your radio voice, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. And then you switch to podcast mode, and
Mhm.
then you got to switch back to, well, we want the Marianne to give us a radio voice, when you're doing your own work. And then you got to turn it off and come back to the pod. And then you got to turn it back on, and back and forth. It must be a little bit nerve wracking.
Not nerve wracking, but the split attention is my biggest challenge, actually. Because in one day I could, do an e-learning module and voice a podcast
Yeah.
and do a radio show, and they're all very different mediums. They're all very,
Yeah.
very different and require different skills and different attention. So I would say more exhausting, more more than nerve-wracking.
Your first, but when you came out of radio,
Mhm.
let me go maybe even back a little bit,
Sure.
a little bit more on this. But when you decided to go into voiceover,
Mhm.
did it coincide with you being already in radio? Like, were you doing both of the jobs
Mhm.
at the same time,
No.
or were you in
No.
radio first and then once you got let go, you decided to go all in on radio? I believe
No
we went
overlap at all. There was
no
no
overlap at
overlap.
all.
No, but like I was pretty confident that I was like, "Oh, I can do this." Voiceover is very competitive and very hard.
Ugh.
I keep saying how hard everything is.
No, but it is. I
But
totally,
you know that.
I absolutely agree. I, it is, and all the voiceover guys that I know are the same thing. But it seems that once they get on a bit of a roll, they're once they get on a bit of a roll, it's fine. But I am curious, like that first paycheck you got as voiceover on your
Mm.
own, was that the moment where you're like, I got this?
It wasn't until I had my first few months where and here's the thing, is like it's very feast or famine. Like I made most of my money in voiceover in the second half of the year this year, like
Interesting.
in a few months, right?
Interesting.
My first half was not great. Um, but that's the thing, is like having all these other things. I'm trying. What was the question again?
Again, some asshole in the basement asking questions. They're not flowing particularly
No,
the
no,
way you
no,
would
no.
be used to in
My
radio.
brain lost
But no, it's all. But it's more of the idea of like that first paycheck that came in.
first paycheck. Sorry about that.
Were you like, I've got this. I think I can do this now, and I'm not as worried now.
It was 2021. Again, so it was February 2020 when I got laid off. I had 6 months to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do. That entire time, it was not a break. It wasn't a vacation. It was making phone calls. It was figuring it out. It was doing
Yeah.
interviews and like charity work. I was trying different things. So I started working late August 2021. Started getting jobs, started booking jobs, and like August, September, October were really, really good. And that's when I realized, like, oh, you can do this. You are good enough to do this. I question that every single day. Every single day that like I don't get a job or don't book this or
Sure.
don't book that, I wonder. But I have a big enough track record now that I'm like, oh, you can make a living out of this. But my attention again is split between podcasting, radio, voiceover, now live emceeing, all these things. So I'm trying to figure out, what do I want to do? What do I want to balance? What's making me money? How do I
Mhm.
grow this all? Does that, yeah.
No, absolutely. And I guess the other side of it is, with it being so competitive,
Hmm.
how do you feel when you because you have to probably submit something. Like, I mean, you got your reel, but you submit something. I had a neighbor friend of mine that was always submitting things,
Hmm.
and how do you feel when you submit something, feel like you nailed it, don't get it, and then hear someone else's voice over that, and you're like, well, I would have done that better. And is it like that in voiceover world, or do you just forget it once you don't get it?
It's very rare that I emotionally attach myself to a role.
Sure.
Very, very rare,
Yeah.
because you never know.
Right.
Generally speaking, I don't really see a lot of this, like, because I don't own a TV, so I don't see a lot of the commercials.
Interesting.
But an e-learning, I would never see. Online videos, maybe. But what I have learned is that casting directors or marketing people, whoever are making these, like, they're either looking for a very specific voice, or
Sure.
like you might just not be it. I still try to keep training. I still try to keep coaching. I still keep trying to learn. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you do it. You forget about it. You just
Forget
like
about it.
you forget about it. Because you can't emotionally attach yourself to that, because you might be like, yeah, I'm like made for this role. I'm a 34-year-old female that they're looking for who's like, and then you just like, you never hear from them again. You just never like. So you just have to like, yeah, you just have to do it and then forget about it.
Do your friends ever? Is there teasing amongst your friends? Who are like, do the voice, Marianne. Do
Ugh,
the
okay.
do the voice.
I've
No,
told
I'm not.
this.
I'm not asking you to do the voice. I'm saying, do they? They're like, hey,
Uh,
when everyone's around, Mary, do the voice for the thing. Like, do people ever do that?
No, my friends, like my good friends, no. But like guys on like dates will like ask me, or they'll I've told this story on Dean's show too, or like a million times, where like guys on dates will be like, they'll be like, "Oh, I've been told I have a great voice. Like I
Can you
should,
get me into voiceover?
yeah." And I'm
Uh,
like, I can't, I don't know what to, I don't know what to tell you.
it's amazing when people don't know, and then they think they know, and then
Yeah.
they take you on a date. They're like, you know, she's in voiceover, right? Can you order the food like you do on
Yeah,
that brick
no,
commercial?
no,
Like, you know what I mean?
no,
You're like, okay, I gotta go.
no, I'm out. I'm out.
It must
And
be
like,
like it's like any kind of acting. To me, it'd be like any. That's why I'm so fascinated with voiceover world because I've
mhm,
got friends in it, and the turn on, turn off part, having to kind of navigate through
mhm,
that side of it is amazing to me. And my one friend who's quite busy in it,
mhm.
who did the intro of my last show. I mean, he's on everything out here. And I'm like, are you on? And I'll just send him a text. You're on that too? And he's like, oh, you recognize that? I'm like, well, you've got a cadence about you that I can tell now.
Cool.
But you
Yeah.
know what I mean? I can get him. But I'm like, you're on that? I'm like, what aren't you on as a gag? But it was a funny sort of thing. And but I'm fascinated with that world. So it's very interesting to me that you're in it. And I'm very
Trying.
stoked for you that you're well. I mean, hey, look, you are, and you've got a great voice for it, and I love the all the reels and stuff that you can find on ivisonvoice.com is
Thank you.
awesome. There's some really great stuff on there. So
Thank
that
you.
leads me to the third portion of this show, which is what will you do next? Where do you want to see this show go? Where do you want to see your career go? What are your plans for the podcast? Go for it.
You know what I was gonna do? I'm just gonna. I wrote down some goals for this year. How about I just share
Amazing.
those with you? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I'm just gonna open this up.
Do we need to make this now a self-help show?
I'm
Do I
not
need
gonna
to?
tell you how much money I wanna
Okay.
make. That's just
No problem.
personal. I put this is just for this year. What will grow my VO, my voiceover clientele. Um, Land a major podcast sponsor or 3 small sponsors. The thing is like I'm almost about to bring on a third sponsor.
Amazing.
So I'm pretty much there. What else do I want to do? Okay, yeah, some of these are too personal to share, but I find that it's so day to day for me. But essentially, I just put this in a tweet that I want to be my own sugar daddy.
Ah,
Um, which I think kind of explains. I want to be at a point where I have enough clients that are regular and maybe be on retainer that I'm able to like function and take vacations without worrying. And I'm moving into a new place with bigger rent and like it's going to be
yeah.
expensive. And I don't want to have that anxiety. I just don't know when that anxiety will go away. But at this point, I'm pretty optimistic about 2023. I have a hard time looking past that, to be totally honest. I have a hard
Sure.
time. But like for my podcast, I was even just talking to Matt about this. One of my big goals this year is I want to make sure that it's more diverse, more people of color. I also want to branch out into the United States and have more American guests, more international guests as well. Um, because I think there's a big problem with diversity and inclusion in the outdoors. So I want to make sure I have guests on
Yeah.
who are able to speak to that. So that's what I want with the podcast. I want to keep growing the podcast. I want to make money off the podcast. I'm very like succinct with this.
Sure.
Voiceover, same stuff. I just want to like keep growing, make more money off of that. Yeah, it's honestly just growing money, building my contacts. That's all I can say at this point. It's really like
Yeah.
and be able to play outside and have good work boundaries and have good playtime. That's essentially it.
The show, and I'll let you go in a minute because I know you got to run. But let's take this outside. Uh, you want to get more diverse, and you want to kind of go down these various paths. But there's not really any boundaries with that. It's really opening you to have discussions with anybody that's outside. Or are you trying to specifically be like, we're going to have the best climber on, the best track star on, the best this, the best that, or do you want to actually have it be an all-encompassing podcast that covers everything outdoors?
I want people who can tell a good story, who connect with nature. That's essentially the number one goal.
Yeah.
I do want I want people who maybe are more experts or maybe gold medalists or people who have huge social media followings, whatever
Sure.
success means nowadays. But the goal is to have those bigger guests. And again, at the end of the day, it has to be a good story. And for me to want to put out good content.
Do you have a favorite episode so far that you've done?
No, I can't say that. No. Every time I put one, okay, do you do this too? Because I listen to them because I just I'm anal about it.
Sure.
But did you ever would you ever listen back and be like, oh no, this is my favorite episode? Oh no, this is my favorite. Like
Well,
it would
I
happen
think
every week. Every 2 weeks it happens. Every
I
2 weeks.
liken it to, and I've never been in radio, but I liken it to when maybe you were given an opportunity to interview an artist or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden that artist gives you something that you weren't expecting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the highlight for me, is when you get sort of like, or you get surprised by somebody that's giving you more than you thought that they would give you.
Mm-hmm.
So those ones for me were great,
Mm-hmm.
or performance of a certain episode. Like on my last one, I had one of the best coffee roasters in the world. It became one of my most downloaded episodes, and I had big giant rock stars on the show. I had all this stuff, but it was the head of, one of the biggest coffee roasters for independent sustainability in the world, and he
Cool.
brought all of his people with him. So what I'm saying is like, that to me versus favorite, it's more like my biggest surprise and my favorite surprise was that, because that was like, I wasn't expecting that
Be open.
whatsoever.
Be
Yeah.
open to being surprised.
Right.
Be open to, like, some of my favorite episodes are the ones I said I didn't have a favorite, but some of my favorite episodes are where I'm learning, like from the scientists, the
Totally.
experts, and you're like, whoa, my mind is absolutely blown. Honestly, some of my favorite quotes or conversations have been with people that I wasn't expecting. Like
Right.
I wasn't sure what to expect. I love being surprised, and I love creating great content for others to listen to.
So let me rephrase that question then.
Mm-hmm.
What was your biggest surprise so far of
Ooh.
those shows where you were like, wow, that I've learned something here, and you know that's my biggest
Um,
surprise.
I kind of knew. So even just my last guest, Ted Khalil, who's actually Matt Kundle's one of Matt Kundle's like good friends. Ted and I had like a pre conversation before, but Ted has like, a normal like bank day job, and he sits at a desk, but he also is the chair of Nordic Canada, for
Right.
example, too. So that was one of my biggest surprises, because like he's so well spoken. He's a huge supporter of females in sport as well. So
Mhm.
that I'm just referring back to that because it's the most recent episode too. But like that was one of my biggest surprises too. Was like, we have this guy who has this normal day job who wears a suit, but also here's this guy who like loves the outdoors and loves supporting females in sport and wants to
Yeah.
help move that forward.
There's a saying in the music business, the Canadian business especially, which is like, uh, not enough money for a cab, too famous for the bus. And in that particular case, that's all, most of the most of the athletes that I know. I've got a Paralympian coming up. One of my great friends is
Incredible.
Mercedes Nickel,
Oh, cool.
who's like a Olympian, but it's like, it's a grind, and it's the Canadian grind,
Hmm.
where, and it's it's in everything that we do. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't change it for anything. We live in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, and you've got a show that talks about exploring some of those parts. It's called Let's Take This Outside. It's an amazing show, dealing with the outdoors. Why don't you tell everybody all the other things about where they can find you online? I'll put up
Sure.
a little bit of stuff here, and then we'll let you go.
Sure. Let's take this outside.ca is my website for my podcast. Ivisonvoice.com is my like professional voiceover website where you can get a hold of me. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just find Marianne Ivison, MA on the air on Twitter, MA Ivison on Instagram. Like there's just like LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn, by the way, but I'm on LinkedIn. It's the
Sure.
worst. It's the worst. Anyway, this is fun. This is super fun.
Well, I am super grateful that you made the time to come on today. This is show number 2, and it's still building out. You'll see that, out of respect to Matt and the fact that you're here, I have removed the microphone from the bottom corner for at least a portion of this interview, for the people watching at home. That's Marianne Ivison. Hopefully you'll come back down the road, and
Yes.
the next
Promise.
time it's DoDidWill, it'll be, I mean, a year from now. Like, what have you done since? And maybe it's blown up even more. And I have I'm a firm believer that that's going to happen because it's a great show and everyone should listen. So thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
friend.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We'll see you next time.